Thanks, Eleni, for the opportunity to come along tonight. I don't think I have been back to DY since I stopped playing hockey for Manly in 2012, and I'll admit that I probably left town very quickly in the early part of 2013. After I was diagnosed and I became sick very quickly, one of the strategies was to leave Sydney, and I'll admit that it wasn't out of any lack of love for the many people that are here tonight that I met through Manly. It was purely out of a position, I guess, of fear that if I didn't leave of my own volition that I might never leave at all. The situation had become quite dire. I made some huge statements when I was asked to present about that I would be humorous and I would also be able to be uplifting in the area of mental health and share with you my perspective. And it is, as most of my friends here will tell you, I'm not really good at getting through any large periods of my life without swearing. So we're going to have a red hot go tonight. I will donate $100 for every time I say the word fuck. No, fuck off. Go. Eleni, you're leaving me. I'm dying up here, girl. Click. Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you about is my experience over the last 6 years. And if at any stage anyone has a question, please put up your hand, because I'm going to tell you things that you will have never heard before. My journey is one which is a large amount through anger and a large amount of hatred and a deep desire to extract revenge on everyone who did me wrong. The list is getting really low, so I need to find a new hobby. With the end of the Royal Commission, I'm hoping that there's like another series that will come up that I can be involved in, because I have the biggest Rowena Orr crush of any person on this planet. Having watched her up close and personal, that woman is a machine. I do a lot of talking to kids, which my friends will tell you that is weird because I hate kids, right? I won't be a dad. I had a vasectomy when I was like 22 or something. Kids to me, you know, they're difficult. They never get your order right at the drive-through. They're always congregating around the mall when you're in a hurry. You know, I don't understand anything that they say. Their music sucks. None of them have heard of Bon Jovi. It's like takes me hours to explain Slippery When Wet. And then vinyl is another topic. And none of that was in my script, so fuck. You're in it with me, aren't you, Dom? Yep, right. So this is a slide that I use to try and explain how I view mental illness. One of the first things that when I was diagnosed is I went and met with a professor of psychology at Randwick Hospital, and he had a DSM manual. The DSM manual is the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, which is where really smart people put all the different mental health conditions. And this thing was like massive. And he said, there's over 3,000 conditions in there. And I'm like, well, right, okay, so you've got a pretty good idea about them. And he goes, no, we just think that's scratching the surface. I said, well, you've got some treatment for them. And he goes, no, not really. I'm like, well, what are you doing? And he said, well, it's the human brain and it's an incredibly complex process. And I said, what's your tip for me? And he said, if you can get to the stage where you have more happy days than sad days, you're on a winner. And I said, fuck, that's not going to happen. I want to get back to where I was. So I drew this to explain to kids that you don't need to think about mental illness as one of those 3,000 DSM conditions. To me, we're all on this continuum. We all are somewhere on this line. There are people in this room who are in that really annoying, happy space that are always happy, and I just hate you. Because when I'm in a state of deep depression and I'm enjoying it, just go away because you're ruining my mood by uplifting, okay? On the other hand, I suffer from a condition called major depressive disorder and severe anxiety. So what that means is I don't experience happiness for any large amount of time. I probably couldn't tell you where I've ever had 7 days in a row of being happy, but I'm incredibly good at masking it. I'm very good at being able to present myself at forums in my career where I look like I'm in complete control and I am an alpha male and I'm a rock star, when if you took my pulse right now, you would fear that I'm about to have a heart attack. But I can disassociate both parts, which is part of, I guess, how I've been able to be successful. Hockey to me was that time when I didn't have to do that. I could just be angry. And I like to think that I channeled it in good ways, but I realise as I reflect on my career that I might have upset a few people. So I try now and make up for all those people and umpires that I have in some way hurt their feelings over the years. And Penno, I know you are a staunch umpire. I don't think you're a very good one, but you do try, mate. You're one of the best. So the thing about the happiness continuum is that the deaths by suicide, the majority of deaths by suicide, the individual did not have a diagnosis of a mental health condition. So these were not people who were already suffering. These are people that went from being happy, really happy, maybe a little bit sad, where something happened in their life and it affected them to the point where they took their own life. And that was incredibly sobering when I found that out, because when you suffer from a condition like I do, and I'm in the 8% of the population where no medication works for. So I've tried close on 1,000 different combinations of antidepressants, antipsychotics, mixtures of them, off-label use, experimental drugs, anything that I could trial with no benefits, although I do get all of the side effects. And the first time I was given a script for antidepressants, I went to a pharmacy. I'm not sure where it was, but I just drove as far away from North Sydney as possible because I didn't want to see anyone that I knew. I thought this is the most embarrassing thing. And I reflect on that. I think how stupid. I'm trying to drive as far away from possible to get some medication which is supposed to help me. And I found this chemist and I walked in. I think I was more scared than the first time I went in to buy condoms. Like, it was just such... It's bad enough having anxiety at the start without going in and handing this script. And I don't remember what medication it was, but afterwards the pharmacist said, Mr. O'Connor, I'd like to ask you a few questions. And I said, okay. He said, have you ever taken antidepressants before? And I said, no, I've only recently been diagnosed. This is new to me. And he said, well, I need to explain to you the side effects that you're likely to experience. And I said, okay. And he said, you're likely to suffer from some headaches, probably an upset stomach, you'll probably get some ringing in your head, you might have some uncomfortable bowel movements, and you might find that you're very sleepy during the day. Thinking, yeah, okay, that's not so bad. He said, you're going to notice an increase in your level of anxiety, you're going to notice an increase in your level of stress, and you're going to notice a pronounced increase in your levels of depression. I'm starting to wonder a little bit here. And then he said, you'll notice on the back we've got a little label which is called a black box warning. And I said, okay, what's that? And he said, well, when you start to take this medication, for the first 4 weeks you'll be a suicide risk. Because the initial part of this medication is that it heightens the parts of your illness that are the worst parts of your illness. I was just hanging on. Most friends here will know I do have a little bit of a short temper. And I said, is there anything more? And he said, yes, it will destroy your sex drive. Well, I lost it. I said, what the fuck are you blokes doing? Which team are you on? You're supposed to be the good guys. And I thought after that, there's no point pretending that I'm not in a battle. with a condition that was obviously going to be very difficult to beat, if that was the first line of treatment that the really smart guys at Johnson & Johnson put forward. Thanks, Alani. I think about an hour behind now. How I view treatment now is completely different to how I viewed treatment back then. To me, treatment is anything at all that will lift your mood from a low state to a happy state. And in the old world, there was a lot of treatment around medication, then it moved towards psychology and psychiatry work. There's a lot of talk when you look at the papers around early intervention, which is really important, and there's no doubt about that. But to me, a prescription is absolutely anything that positively improves the symptoms. And I find that, thanks Alani, that's a different mindset to look at because everyone here is on this continuum. I live in the red zone. I spend all of my life in the red zone. I would be very happy to get anywhere near the middle. But for people in the room, think back to the statistic that the majority of people that take their lives through suicide don't suffer from a mental illness, which means that the ability to slide down can be very quick, it can be very, very, very unforgiving, and the worst case scenario is a final outcome that you don't want. So it's really important that we put in place the prevention. The prevention, to me, stops really, really happy people from spending too much time with me. And it also helps to keep the kids of today from going down to the red zone. And the majority of mental illnesses have manifested in the kids by the age of 17. So 70% of mental illnesses have already done their worst. They've made a home by the age of 17. So by the time they're 25 and they haven't had any treatment, you can see how the condition then deteriorates. Youth suicide is the biggest killer in Australia. More kids die through suicide than any other condition. And as John said before, the statistics aren't getting any better. We seem to be fixated on trying new treatments when at that age, the most important thing that we can do is around the prevention. Hockey to me was, without a doubt, the single most important thing that helped me through tough times. The people in this room who will never know it were there for me when I thought there was no reason to go on. Those Saturday night games at Homebush in the cold, those games down in Sutherland, playing against my very good mates in the Shire. We still share many fond memories. Those days were the breaks. And for me, the prevention was, or getting to that point of prevention was important. For a lot of people, that understanding what that prevention area is stops you going down. And if you aren't predisposed and you know people and you're a parent, getting your kids involved in sport, in social networks, building resilience, staying healthy, creating endorphins, that is by far the most important thing that we can do in Australia to stop youth suicide and to stop mental illness degenerating. Thanks, Alan. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story and I'll tell you a little about some of the amazing things that I've come across and that I think as a country we are very close to having access to. So this is what my happiness continuum looks like. I tend to bounce between, or used to, being very, very sad and needing urgent care. And there wasn't a lot of treatment options. My experience is not uncommon to most people who have been through severe mental illness, in that I put my hands and my life, if you like, in the Medicare system. And there's another presentation which I won't go into tonight, but I refer to my experience as death by Medicare. And I mean that because I did every single thing that my doctors asked. I took every single medication, I did every single self-help program, I attended every single psychiatrist session. I did everything possible, and despite that, a little bit over 3 years ago, I reached that point where I decided that there was no more solutions and that it was time to end my own life. I'm not at the position where I think I can ever talk about that evening. Needless to say that I survived. And the next morning, I thought, I need to come up with a new strategy. So I called together, thanks, Alani. I called together the River Road Brains Trust. So this is George on your left and Daisy in the middle. Sorry, it's not a great photo. And then there's Fred. Anyone who has ever gone past any social media that I have access to, with the exception of LinkedIn, will have seen photos of Fred. I refer to him as the world's #1 dog. They're very sport, they're very loved. I've left each of them $1 million in my will. Most people want to come back as one of my dogs in a future life, but they are the reason why I'm here. Because when I was in that depth of depression and nothing worked, these 3 little faces each morning was the reason to get out of bed. It was the reason to sit up. It was the reason that I was like, you know what, I'm just going to walk these guys and then see what happens. And that got me out of bed. And then that got me out of the house. And then the day started. And if it wasn't for these 3, I wouldn't be here today, because those years that I spent alone in an insular environment were not smart. But fortunately, my 3 fur babies kept me through it. And I talk to them. I talk to them like they're my kids. We have lots of conversations. We talk about when it's time to put the bins out, and we talk about who's going to get the bins in. Right? We talk about no dogs on the bed. We talk about when I have my little friends that are females come down for sleepovers, that they're not in the bedroom. Right? And sometimes Daddy has to go away for the weekend and they don't get to come. It's only awkward when they talk back. But when you're diagnosed as being medically unfit to fly a plane or own a gun, dogs talking back to you just seems like, part of the role of honour. So that's $25,000 worth of dogs there. And I would spend that again and again and again, because to uncover what worked for me and to explain that those pointy, annoying little shitheads, who are special needs and high demanding, are my anchor to this world. And when I talk to, thanks Alani, when I talk to my doctors now about how I was back then, they describe me as being a complete wall. They could not get through to me. They couldn't talk to me. But as I got further and further along in a treatment perspective, which I would like to talk to you about now, they made it very clear that if I hadn't have had them, it would have been a tough struggle. So after I didn't take my life through suicide, I sat down and we came up with some rules. So the first rule was that I am the only person who is responsible for my health. Not the doctors, not the medication, not anyone. I am my own doctor. I'm the only person who can save myself. The first step in winning a battle is to acknowledge that you're in one. And to me, it would be impossible to beat a mental illness if you pretended that it didn't exist. That might seem like a fairly straightforward thing, but I emailed every single person on the planet that I knew to tell them that I had a mental illness one day. After that, hundreds of people emailed back to say that they had a mental illness too. And all of a sudden, I didn't feel alone. All of a sudden, I realised that I had an incredibly large network of friends who were in it with me, and life got better. Unfortunately, I forgot that I'd emailed Mum and Dad, so we managed to get out and explain it to them before Dad read the email, which was fine because the races were on, and they were at least three events away from reading emails. I made myself a promise because I thought I'm not doing this just for my own benefit. I said I will win this and I will help others. It was a big part of making the decision to do the 7:30 report and talk about the systemic issues in life insurance around discriminating around the mentally ill. I was ostracised, I was abused, sent threatening letters, all sorts of abuse on the back of that, and almost 4 months later, the Royal Commission validated every single thing that I said. The Royal Commission was uplifting because they told me Thank you. They said that they had almost no people step forward with significant stories until I did my ABC report, which was disappointing because at that stage I was front runner to be called up to give evidence. And I was keen as to do that, but for the wrong reasons, and I'm very glad that they selected other people. The industry will change now. In the very near future, they will change the rules around how mental illness is treated. It will become illegal to conduct surveillance on the mentally ill. They will not be able to charge extra premiums in a lot of categories. The claims process will be demonstrably easier, and people will not go through a claims process and come out the other side feeling like the claims process was worse than having a mental illness. I'm not the reason why all that is going to happen. I was just the person, as Stuart talked about before, I was probably the final swing of the hammer, and reality is that it was a pretty big swing because I had a shitload of anger. But it's cracked and they can never put it back together the way that was. More importantly, to me, the right treatment is far more important than the right diagnosis. It doesn't really matter to me what they class my condition as. What I care about is what do I do to make it better. And that is important for anyone here who might end up in the same position, that if something works and something makes you happier, then you just keep doing it. And if the doctors don't agree, well, you are your own doctor. You're responsible for your own happiness. And you own that shit. And you make those decisions and you question what they say. 10 months after my first diagnosis, they said to me, "Oh, sorry, we got it wrong. We have to change your medication." If I'd asked more questions, I don't think that would have happened. But the most important thing for me was to win a fight that has never been won. I'm going to have to do things that have never been done. I certainly couldn't rely, thanks Alani, on my doctors, so I fired them all, which was a little bit aggressive because you're supposed to replace them before you fire them, but that was fine. So I worked quickly with some treating physicians, and I'll skip over the next slide, Alani. I'll go straight to the ketamine slide. So after getting in a position, you can go back. When I got to a position where I felt that I was ready to try a different type of medication, and after all the medication that I had been through, the low that you experience when another treatment fails is indescribable because you are hoping that everything that you try is that silver bullet. So after I fired my doctors, I sat down and I went, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to do it myself. This can't be that hard. I know where you live. So I heard about this treatment in America called ketamine infusions. So I started to research it. And the more I read, the more I was surprised. And I'll give you a really quick overview of what ketamine infusions entail. So ketamine is a drug. It's an anaesthetic. It's in every hospital and every ambulance in Australia. It's what they would normally use for infants in surgery. It's regarded as one of the three of humanity's most important drugs, and is one of the world's safest drugs. It was invented over 50 years ago, and there is no patent on ketamine, so that means nobody can make any money through selling it. About 20 years ago, some doctors at Yale, more than that, 30 years ago, some doctors at Yale conducted some studies, and they uncovered some trial results which were just unbelievable. What they did is they gave some individuals with severe depression a small dose of ketamine over an hour, and they measured the results. What they found is that their symptoms around suicide, around depression, anxiety disappeared immediately. And when I say immediately, within minutes. People who were manic depressant were sitting up having a conversation, they were laughing and they were walking around. Since then, Yale, Harvard, Mount Sinai, Oxford, and many universities around the world have continued those trials. There's been hundreds of trials, and there has been thousands of people whose lives have been saved. In the US, there is no research in any other area of antidepressants other than ketamine. It is the new holy grail, and it is a miracle drug, and it cures. So why don't we have it here? Well, I didn't really know, but I researched and I found a doctor who had been at Yale right at the start, and he was well known as being one of the best doctors in the world. So I rang him and I said, I would like you to treat me. And he said no. And I said, well, I'm going to fucking come anyway. So I sent all my medical records, and I got on a plane and I flew to America. And then I flew across to Florida, and I got another flight, and then I got a bus, and then I got a car. I ended up in a place called Pensacola, Florida. Pensacola, Florida has the highest percentage of Trump voters, God-loving, NRA-membered individuals in the planet. You will see Pensacola for the rest of your life now, because it's where he goes to for his rallies when he needs to do a quick rah-rah. I woke up the next morning, walked out of my hotel, and this is what I saw. I'd rang the doctor, and they told me the line was disconnected. I asked 3 Uber drivers. They said they'd never heard of the guy. I'd paid the money in advance, and here I was. I know that I'd said that if you're going to do something that's never been done, well, I'm standing here on this road thinking this is the dumbest fucking thing I have ever done in my life. This used to be a town because before Hurricane Ivan or Katrina, I'm not really sure, one of them. And eventually I found my way to the doctor. Dr. Jerry Grass has the cure for the majority of mental illnesses that exist today. He is by far one of the most amazing individuals that's ever walked on this planet. He practices medicine to treat people, not for money. He refuses to sell his treatment protocol to any of the large pharmaceutical companies because they cannot guarantee him that they will not bastardize it, water it down, and reduce its benefits. So he treats people, four people a day. Each person gets 3 infusions over a 4-day period, and the benefits of that will then last up to 6 months. The more that you go back, the longer the benefits last and the longer the duration it can go. The cost for the drugs, the cost of the medication, to me, each year I spend $100,000. Now, when you eliminate the business class airfare, the door-to-door limo, staying at the Hyatt, which is 100 k's away, and being chauffeured in a Tesla each day, we can start to get that down to a manageable level. When you take out my special needs diets of filet mignon and massages each night without any other sort of endings, we get down to the figure where it costs $1,000 an infusion. The majority of that cost is purely profit. You could do it for a lot less. So Jerry, and this is the only time in his entire life, he's 70 years old, the only time in his entire life he's allowed someone to take a photo. Because I made him a promise. I said, Jerry, if you let me take a photo, I will promise I will not stop telling people in Australia about what you do until they come over and they ask you to come to Australia and teach Australian doctors how to save lives. And he said, okay. And afterwards, I said, Jesus, mate, you had your best Under Armour sneakers on that day. That's cutting-edge medicine right there. He's a pretty dry sense of humour guy. Well, I've had 40 infusions in 2 years. It's 2 years to the day since I left, and when I left to go to the States, I bought a one-way ticket. I had no intention of coming back if it didn't work. This was going to be it. 27 infusions, he found the right dose for me. It's not that difficult for most people. They would need 3 before he could find what they call the optimal spot. What does it do in your brain? It's a long story, but effectively what it creates is a concentration of chemicals in your brain which reboot the parts of your brain that depression kills. It starts the serotonin uptake again, and it helps with your neurons to start to receive the impulses again. It does the most amazing things that you could possibly think of. This is the clinical studies of how effective ketamine infusions are. He is able to reduce the symptoms, in 85% of his patients. So he takes the worst of the worst, the people that nothing else works for on this planet, and he fixes 85% of them. I go 6 months now where I don't need any treatment as opposed to the infusions. At best, in Australia with an antidepressant, it's around 35%, and I think we know the side effects of that. So I'm going to just wrap up there. I'll finish off with a statement which from Yale and from Oxford, and I think these institutions pretty much sum up how I feel about ketamine infusions. Dr. Jared Senakora, who was one of the original doctors who discovered the ketamine infusions, he said, if you have patients that are likely to seriously injure themselves or kill themselves within a short period of time, and they've tried the standard treatments, how do you not offer ketamine treatment? And Oxford had a similar view. They said the dangers of not using the treatment outweigh the potential risks, especially in patients with suicidal ideation. I have a standing offer to any physician in Australia to come to America to go through the training program that Dr. Grass offers. I've spoken to Pat McGorry at Headspace and a number of other institutions with interest but not commitment. At some stage, I believe that it will take us in the room to demand an explanation why it is not offered. I believe that parents like Stuart and Annette should not have to go through what they went through. There is a treatment and we can access it. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time. I'm not sure how much we got up to. 800, okay, we'll make it 1,000, and Dom has agreed to throw in 1,000 as well. Well done, Dominic D'Souza, Manly Hockey Club, one of the best halfbacks in the business.